AP 120, Chapter 9, Topics Diencephalon, Brainstem, and Cerebellum. So the diencephalon is an internal structure. You only can see it when you cut into the brain. So for instance, this sagittal section. And the diencephalon makes up the head of the seahorse, its head and little mouth. The diencephalon has two main regions. It has the thalamus, which is the bulk of the head, including the little eye, and the hypothalamus, which makes up the beak portion of the diencephalon, or seahorse. And then this is the pituitary gland, so I like to say that the seahorse is eating the pituitary gland. There are associated structures with nearby. Of course, we have on top the corpus callosum from the cerebrum. In the back, posterior side, is the pineal gland. Inferior to the hypothalamus is the mammillary body. Again, anterior, we have the optic chiasm, where the two optic nerves cross each other. And then connecting the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland is this little stalk called the infundibulum. Now, the thalamus is extremely important in sensory information. The thalamus has almost all sensory information come into it, where it will sort that information and redirect it to the correct area. So the hypothalamus acts as a relay station of sensory information. The only exception is olfaction. The sense of smell does not pass through the thalamus, but everything else pretty much does. So the thalamus can pinpoint the origin of the sensory input, where it came from. It can produce a general awareness of it, like, oh, something is touching my knee, vaguely. And then the cerebral cortex can also communicate with the thalamus, perhaps if you're trying to consciously be more aware or less aware of something, some area. Then we have the hypothalamus, the beak of the seahorse. The hypothalamus has a lot of important functions because it helps to maintain homeostasis by regulating our visceral activities. So it helps to maintain that stable internal environment by controlling many of the processes of the glands and organs. And it also is a link to the endocrine system. So the nervous system and the endocrine system are linked together via the hypothalamus. So functions of the hypothalamus can include regulating heart rate and arterial blood pressure, so how fast the heart beats or how slow, and the pressure in the arteries. Helps to regulate body temperature, normally at 98.7 degrees Fahrenheit. It helps to regulate the amount of water and electrolytes in the bloodstream, so water electrolyte balance. It helps to regulate hunger and body weight, which of course is tied to some degree to hunger. The hypothalamus also controls the movements and secretions of the digestive tract, so it helps control what's going on in the gastrointestinal tract. And it also helps to regulate sleep and wakefulness. So it helps to cause the things that make us feel sleepy or awake or kind of in that fuzzy, daydreamy middle level of consciousness. Limbic system. The limbic system is the brain tissues that help to control and regulate emotions. So it controls emotional experience, how we experience our emotions, and how we express emotions. And the limbic system is a collection of tissues found both in the cerebrum and in the diencephalon. So it has, for instance, the amygdala, which is part of the cerebrum, hippocampus, part of the cerebrum, the hypothalamus, which is obviously part of the diencephalon. It even includes the olfactory bulb. So also the limbic system is where we find our emotional linked memories. So memories where you had a very intense emotion tend to be localized to the limbic system. Now, why do we have emotions? Well, in general, it was thought that the emotions originally were to generate pleasant or unpleasant feelings to help guide us in terms of survival. So say a slug going in one direction and it's getting closer to things that are food-like, we'll get a pleasant sensation, so it'll keep going that way. But if it's going in a different direction where it's getting the sensation of salt that's hurting it, then it experiences something unpleasant and turns around and goes away. So that's where we think emotions originally came from. And again, the structures that support the limbic system are in the border between the cerebrum and the diencephalon. All right, moving on to the brainstem. Here's an inferior view versus the mid-sagittal section. The brainstem, of course, connects to the spinal cord. It's one of its functions. The brainstem can be broken into three regions: the superior midbrain, the middle pons, and the inferior medulla oblongata that connects to the spinal cord. Or in terms of the seahorse, the midbrain is the neck of the seahorse, the pons is the body of the seahorse, and the medulla oblongata is the tail. So we'll start with the medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata obviously transmits all impulses between the brain and spinal cord. All the tracks coming from and to the spinal cord have to pass through the medulla oblongata. In addition, the medulla oblongata controls some of our very critical visceral functions. So for instance, the cardiac center is localized here, and that helps to regulate the heart rate. And obviously we want to be able to control how fast or slow the heart rate beats, because that is very important. The vasomotor centers here to help control blood pressure, again another critical function. And also the respiratory center is found in the medulla oblongata. This helps to control the rate and depth of breathing. So pretty clearly, the core functions needed to stay alive are localized to the medulla oblongata. Then we have the pons. The pons is able to continue transmitting impulses between the cerebrum and diencephalon and the spinal cord. It helps to regulate the rate and depth of breathing. So for instance, it helps prevent us from breathing in too deep. So no matter how hard you breathe in, you cannot overinflate your lungs, which is good. The pons also has a lot of connections with the cerebellum, and out of all parts of the brainstem, it's the part that communicates the most with the cerebellum. And then we have the midbrain. Midbrain attaches directly to the diencephalon and to the cerebrum. So the midbrain helps convey impulses between the diencephalon and the cerebrum. It's attached to both of those things. The midbrain also houses centers for auditory and visual reflexes. So for instance, a visual reflex, say something suddenly darts into your field of vision, your eyes automatically move to look at what that thing is coming at you. An auditory reflex, to say a loud noise suddenly, abruptly occurs behind you, you will automatically jump and probably turn to see what that noise is. So those reflexes are localized to the midbrain. Cerebellum. Those of you who have seen the Powerpuff Girls, this is the secretary to the mayor. Her name is Cerebellum, and therefore she is the brain to the mayor, which might be why you never see her with a head. In actuality, the cerebellum is this two-hemisphered structure toward the posterior side of the brain. It is very wrinkly. The cerebellum has a lot of functions regulating and related to movement. So, for instance, the cerebellum receives a lot of information about proprioception. So it's integrating sensory information related to the position of our body parts. Turns out our brain knows where all the different parts of our body are located via the information from proprioception. And a lot of that information ends up in the cerebellum. As a consequence, the cerebellum is also involved in equilibrium because we're able to move in our environment more smoothly if we are aware of where the parts of our body are in that environment. Another big function is the cerebellum coordinates skeletal muscle activity. So it helps to regulate muscle movement. Basically, what the cerebellum does is it compares what movement we want to occur with what movement is actually occurring, and then make adjustments so that we are actually doing what we want to do. So it has a very key managerial function there. And then finally, the cerebellum is important in maintaining posture. It's controlling subconsciously the muscles we have to contract in order to maintain our posture, whether it is good posture or bad posture. Ataxia. Ataxia is the loss of ability to coordinate muscular movements. Ataxia can be caused by a variety of things. Temporarily, it could be caused by, say, getting drunk, so from alcohol. So if you think about how someone who is drunk moves around, they're kind of wobbly, they have trouble going in a straight direction. When they're trying to grab something, often they miss a little bit and knock things over. So that is ataxia. However, it can be caused permanently by damage to the cerebellum, basal nuclei, or the inner ear. And permanent ataxia is not fun because it's all the bad parts of being drunk and none of the good parts. And that is it for this part of the lecture.